Okay, I think we're live now. Hello, wonderful, amazing humans. Welcome to the ADHD Roundtable. It's an open discussion about ADHD to bring normalcy to neurodiversity while engaging in deep conversations and having fun. And we are on episode 18, and I'm so excited for all these lovely humans to be here today with me. And I'm just going to be super transparent with everyone because my energy is going to feel different from the other episodes because I have a headache today and I've been going through lots of emotional things, and astrology is weird right now, so I'm kind of all over the place on the brink of tears often. So if you're with me on that, welcome. I don't find anything wrong with it. I just want to be transparent with where I am. Because most of you all watching this are super in tune with energy anyways, and so you'd be able to pick up on it and be like, what's wrong with Jess? I'm just going to tell you. Okay, so lovely, beautiful Jesse, Meredith, and Ashley. What is your current favorite thing about your flavor of ADHD?
I can go first, since I'm on the first square here, I think. I would say that my favorite part of my ADHD is, and probably will forever be, my ability to hyperfocus. It can definitely be my arch nemesis, but also my superpower most days. I do a lot of stuff with bookkeeping and numbers, and the ability to zone in on a spreadsheet for 6 to 8 hours and hold all that information at one time in my head. Um, it's funny, I heard someone compare ADHD to being your own LLM, large language model, like your own AI in your brain that's just really unfocused. And I was like, that's actually a great analogy, is I'm holding all of these pieces of information from everywhere. And when I get that hyper focus, I'm locked in. But otherwise, it's just an LLM with no direction.
That's so interesting. And your superpower to like hyper focus on spreadsheets for 6 to 8, that's impressive.
I would say that it's commonly associated with ADHD or neurodivergence to have like these hyperfixations where you're incredibly obsessed with something, where you're like, oh my gosh, I read this book about tuning forks and now like I need to read as many books on Audible about it, go and find all the things and like really be deeply into it and then kind of move on to the next thing. And then maybe it's in a drawer somewhere, but I feel like I am seeing now how all of those things come together and how sometimes the universe just has you almost on this interesting path of gathering information to become who you're becoming in the world. And I feel like that's my favorite thing right now is really seeing how all of those things had a purpose and have allowed me to kind of find my joy and kind of create my own path as a business owner in the world.
Mm,
I love that. I feel like my answer is a little similar to that as well, Ashley. My very favorite thing about my ADHD is how intensely curious I am. I do, when I'm interested in something, I want to learn everything about it. So I know a little about a lot of things. And I think that means that I can connect with a lot of different kind of people. I think that that curiosity also leads to a lot of empathy. And there's all these other positive traits in my life that are driven by that intense curiosity that comes with ADHD.
I love that. Did you all know the full quote of Jack of all trades? Because we only quote part of it, and I find it so interesting. Because it doesn't give you the full picture. So the full quote is a jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one.
Yeah, we cut it right off at
Mm.
the master of none a lot of times. I definitely feel like that quote was used to like shame me at some point in my career for, wanting to make all the shifts that I've made. But I really love that you're sharing that last part. It's a whole different perspective.
When I found that out, I was like, what? Why do we use this to share? I've always been a person who's like, I'm not gonna be like, I went into music education and I had to be really good at my instrument, but I don't want to be the best flautist in the world. I don't care. Like I would rather I find a lot too many different things interesting. And it's not even that like the most wonderful flautist in the world. Like kudos to you that that's what you're so passionate about. It's just not me. So when I found out that quote, I was like, vindication. Oh, okay. So I love to talk about the fact that ADHD, like getting a diagnosis or not getting a diagnosis, is a very personal choice. I work with clients who haven't been diagnosed and who haven't, and they just self-diagnosed. And I don't think there's a right or wrong. So, but I would love to hear about a little bit about your guys' stories. Like, when did you clue in that maybe you had ADHD? Are you diagnosed? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
So for me, it was through, I also have MDD, and I was actually going into a trial for a different medication. And they asked me if I had ADHD, and I said no. And they had responded back to me that I had been medicated for ADHD for a couple of years, and I didn't know that that's what that medication was for. And then to be part of this trial, I had to make sure that I didn't have a diagnosis of ADHD. So it was very weird to like at once recognize that I had been being treated for it, but I still couldn't claim the legal diagnosis because it would exclude me from other medications. So
Oh, yeah.
it was really weird for me, but then at the same time it was like all of these small pieces of my life clicked into place as to why things had gone down the way that they had. And I did a bunch of research into it because I was like, I don't have ADHD. Like my nephews, my cousin, my male cousins, they have ADHD. I had no idea that inattentive ADHD was even a thing. Like, and then I was like, oh, and then it's like, look it up, and they're like, women later in life tend to get diagnosed with this, and these are the signs that they showed as kids. And I was like, For me, I got held back in seventh grade. But I now know it was because of ADHD because I didn't take eighth grade at all. I tested out of everything. Like I literally watched it on a computer and then aced all the tests. So it wasn't a lack of knowledge or ability to learn and understand. It was that classroom that was only diagnosed or, was only for one or two types of learning styles. It just wasn't for me. And this was before, they have kids online and stuff now. That wasn't an option. Um, so that makes so much more sense. And I, for a lot of years, like really beat myself up about that. And I'm like, oh, actually, that wasn't my fault. Like there was nothing that could have been done then. Like I had all the knowledge. I proved that part, but it still was like, but why? And now I know why.
Hmm. Thanks for sharing.
So I would say that it started with my son. I have two kids. My son is 7, my daughter's about to be 5. And I felt like he wasn't diagnosed at like the age of 2, but I remember thinking, I'm like, how do people have second kids? I was like, I don't understand. Like, I felt like it was like such a different experience. And I felt like there was a lot of challenges in early motherhood. And it just felt as though there was some kind of different journey that I was on, but I couldn't quite name it yet until I feel like I really eventually had my son diagnosed at the age of around 3.5. I dove into learning as much as I could about it. And then I was like, wait a second, like this kind of sounds like me. And then I felt like there was this rise of stuff on TikTok of everyone's talking about ADHD. And I feel like in particular, a lot of women like really had their eyes open to how much neurodivergence differs in, I feel like different bodies. And I feel as though I did get a diagnosis later myself because there was a lot of talk about whether my son was going to start medication after trying a lot of different interventions. And it was really coming down to a safety issue of him running out of the classroom. And I share that because I felt like there's so much judgment about whether you put your kids on medication or not. And it's such a personal journey. And it's emotional because I feel like, I think parents go through a lot of different things shame wise. I think there's so many things as like a neurodivergent parent that are hard to talk about, right? But I'm glad that people are talking about it. I did get the diagnosis and was curious about medication for myself so I could really feel like, is this going to fully change my son? Is this going to shut him down? And I feel like I've really kind of had a reason to go deeper in that diagnosis journey or exploring those things for myself in order to be the best parent that I can and learn and understand it as much as I can understand his experience. And that's been my journey thus far.
Thanks.
Well, mine also started with my daughter. My daughter was evaluated initially around the age of 3.5, 4. At the time, they told us it's kind of a gray area here. She's very young. She definitely has this speech delay. So let's put her in, resource and give her some support. So we were part of the special education system from very early on for her. And as she got older, we identified some other things happening. And with each, every couple of years, we did a reeval, and they kept saying, she's really a gray area for ADHD. And I always found that surprising because at home we saw, I think, a pretty different child than they were seeing at school. And I was very convinced before any of the evaluators were, because I had started to really dig into it and learn about how masking is a very common behavior, especially with girls and women. So I started seeing signs in her very early on and really diving into the information. And when we received her formal diagnosis, that was when I feel like the light bulb started going off for me too. We finally had a provider that specialized in ADHD. And I remember sitting in that office, and she wasn't just looking at those reports from her teachers and things like that. She was watching my daughter, and she looked at her and said, wow, I'm seeing a lot of rumination with her. And I, at the time, hadn't really heard that word. I had an idea of what I thought she meant by that, but I went home and Googled it, and I was like, oh my gosh, rumination is an ADHD trait or symptom, and that was me. I am a big time ruminator. If anyone's listening that doesn't have familiarity with that term, like I didn't back in the day, it's basically like that overthinking that we can't get out of, and going over and over and over things in our mind. So when I heard that, it really just was a light bulb moment, and I started investigating more and more things. Once we had her supported really well, and I recovered from all of the bandwidth it took to get her diagnosis, I eventually sought my own diagnosis. There was definitely a long period of being self-identified though before I was ready to start that whole process over again for myself.
Yeah. For any of you who are watching, all these beautiful people decided to get diagnosis, which is great. But I do have other episodes of people who have chosen not to get a diagnosis for their own reasons. So know that you're not wrong for not wanting to do that if you don't want to. But for those of you who are thinking about getting a diagnosis, what kind of advice would you give somebody when they're looking for a provider to help them with the diagnosis? Because there are a lot of really horrible stories out there of people trying to get providers, and then they're not being believed in, they're told they're wrong, or whatever the case may be. So what kind of advice would you give people who are going through the diagnosis process?
I think there were two things that made a difference for me. One was being able to get some personal recommendations from people in my community that had received an adult diagnosis, and be able to pick their brains about what the process was like for them. I was very, very scared that I wouldn't be believed. I was definitely a very heavy masker my whole life. But I was struggling really, really deeply. And I felt like I was going to be devastated if I walked in and they were like, oh, did you find out about this? on social media, or I got any of the, kind of like stigmas thrown at me that are common right now. So knowing that the provider I was going to see had seen other adults that looked like me that I related to that had similar symptoms, that was comforting. I know not everybody has those types of connections where they know someone that have used someone locally, but if there's other ways to source that information, perhaps it's asking in a local Facebook group or seeking that information where you can get that personal story from someone about how they were treated at a practice. I think that can help. What also helped me feel confident was really getting familiar with the diagnostic criteria. That had obviously started with a process with my daughter. I knew what kind of questionnaire I'd be filling out. But I also wrote down a lot of examples of how ADHD had impacted me my whole life. I think one of the most common reasons people are not given the diagnosis as an adult is they're not able to talk about how this affected them in childhood. And that's part of the diagnostic criteria. So most providers will ask you about that. And for some of us, it's not black and white. A lot of us maybe didn't, struggle in school. A lot of us might have been really interested in school, but like struggled with the organizational piece. So understanding how it impacted you in different domains of life and different phases of life, and writing those examples down. So I knew I might freeze in the moment because I was so nervous. So having that available to me made me feel a lot more confident.
That's awesome.
For me, like, I still don't have the official diagnosis. Like, I got diagnosis and the doctor told me I had it, but it's not on paperwork. So I guess I would almost say, like, also the opposite of that. If you're someone like me who has a drug treatment resistant issue with another diagnosis, maybe think about what that will mean for you going forward also, because it does exclude you out of a lot of drug tests if that's something. So just be cautious with getting that official diagnosis about how it can affect your other medical conditions in your life if you have other neurodivergencies. Just be aware that you're talking to your doctor about what that looks like for your future treatment possibilities of your other diagnoses. Because I was told, like, it's not going to work for this treatment plan and it might cause you to have other issues in the future. So while I still remain slightly medicated for my ADHD, I don't have like the Ritalin or the other stuff that other people find really helpful. And I've kind of had to balance that. So make sure that you're taking like a holistic approach look at everything and not just getting the ADHD diagnosis if it's not going to benefit you maybe in the way that like is a medication that you need or something like that, or service. I guess that's my warning letter to it.
Thank you for that.
I definitely agree that it's like considering what the purpose or reason would be to get the diagnosis and to see that it doesn't make you like less valid. Like if you don't have a diagnosis, I think I absolutely agree with that. I feel like on the provider side, there was really only a short time that I was officially seeing a provider until I decided to let go of the medication and just kind of dive deeper into understanding myself and making adjustments to support myself better. On my son's side, he has an autism diagnosis as well as ADHD. And so there's a variety of providers that we have always worked with within the school district. And I feel like I always want to make sure there's a values alignment there because for me, for many years, I was absolutely against ABA. And I was like, I've done the research, I've watched autistic adults talk about this. It has a very shady history. And I've just learned in my journey that like things really change and that sometimes you can never say never until you're at the point where you're like, okay, I'm going to listen. I'm going to ask, I'm going to share my concerns. And I absolutely feel like for me, it was being very honest about my concerns, very honest of like, hey, I don't care if my child's jumping and flapping his arms when he's excited. I don't need that. I don't want to change who he is to make other people more comfortable. And they were like very reassuring, like that, hey, this is really about him adjusting to environments for safety or for his goals or to be able to thrive. If he wants to make friends, to have a place to practice that. And for me, like, feeling comfortable with that. And I feel like also it can be really challenging to sometimes speak up and to be that advocate for your child or to ask questions. Like, I think sometimes it's in our culture, we are taught to be too polite, right? And to be quiet about things. But I would say to like really know that you're going to be the one that's your advocate or your child's advocate, and to be willing to ask those difficult questions. It's going to be in the best interest of everyone involved, especially if you're working with that provider for a long period of time. And I know it's uncomfortable. It's a tough journey to go on, but it's very worth it.
Yeah. It is okay to fire your provider. I have helped several people fire. Oh yeah, I forgot. That was something we worked on together.
Sometimes you need a little help realizing that your provider is not maybe the best provider for you. Just helped me with that. So
yeah. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. What is something that was recently really challenging with your ADHD? And yeah, just share it with something that's challenging recently.
I'm going to go back to that LLM idea is with that large language. Like I think this is just kind of one of those things that's constantly hard for me is like I have 10 million ideas and it's where to focus on that instead of doing 10 million 1 second things to put 10 million seconds into the right basket. And I think that's always because I have a million ideas on how to make money and a million ideas how to look at your business and stuff. But if I'm helping a million people, I'm not really actually helping anyone. And that is a constant struggle for me in my business. And I think in life probably in general is all the ideas and not having the hyper focus to follow through on all of it unless there's a deadline or it's for someone else.
Yep.
I feel you on that. Like, for delivering things to clients, very different in terms of like, I'll be honest, like getting to my taxes and things like that are extremely, extremely challenging for me. And for me, it's really been showing up and doing those things that are necessities that are do not necessarily bring me joy, but like support the structure, and they're just needed. I think also self-care and taking care of myself has been difficult. I have a tendency to disassociate a lot, and I think that that's one of the journeys that I've been really trying to speak to on my social media. Is like, I feel like it's overlooked because we kind of go into this mode where we're just like almost very good in the chaos. We can be on top of everything, be there from everyone else. And I didn't realize it until I also have like a very sensitive neurodivergent partner that that he'll stop and he'll be like, wait, take a breath. What's happening for you? And I'll just like break down in tears. And I honestly feel like until I had someone like really notice that and reflect that back in me, I didn't even notice that about myself. I feel like I have such I'm so good at being able to just go into a mode and be there for everybody. And it's really been about learning, like, I need to take care of myself. I need to pour into myself first, or else this whole boat's going to sink here. And that's the journey for sure.
Yeah.
Gosh, I relate so much to both of your answers. Something that's come up for me a lot in recent months is I'm really struggling to honor what my true capacity is. I've spent a lot of time in my business trying to prevent burnout. I've ran a few small businesses before this one, and they were doing just fine, and I would get burnout and feel like I needed to walk away, and I don't want that to happen this time around. I recently released my first book, and with that has been, thank you. It's been a lot of promotion. It's taken like a lot of energy for that, and I'm having a lot of requests of my time, and most of them are requests I'd really like to be able to say yes to. They're things I want to do. They're things that I know would be good for my career. But I'm seeing those early signs of burnout, and I'm starting to feel like that apathy and that drain of energy and the headaches. And I know that I have to get back to knowing and trusting that I'm right about what I can actually handle and be able to say no or not now, or maybe let's circle back to this in a few months versus saying that impulsive yes because I want to do it. So I've been having to walk myself back almost every single day to what my long-term goals are versus wanting to take every opportunity that's in front of me right now.
Mm. Man, I have struggled with the burnout thing many times. And it wasn't until like a couple years ago for myself that I was like, I made the connection that I was trying to get myself to be doing as much stuff as I was doing in college. Now I'm 36. So one, that's not going to happen. I'm not 18 anymore. But also, what I was doing at 18 was perpetuating the cycle of burnout. I would just do a lot of things the whole school year, get to Christmas break and do nothing, and then do all the things, and then get to summer and do nothing because I was just doing this burnout cycle that I didn't know what was happening because like this is just how we do things. This is how we operate. So I was trying to get myself, why can't I do as much? Why I should be able to do blah 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 blah. Like no. And do you actually want to live your life that way, Jess? Like, no. Actually, one of the things that I learned in my coaching at the Hendricks Institute was they talk about essence pace. It's like the essence of who you are has a specific pace. And some people move really slow. Some people like to walk quickly. Some people like to run, like their essence pace. And when I tap into my essence pace, I am slow as fuck. Like I'm just very slow, and I would rather meander and walk around and stare at the sky and the flowers and notice all the beauty and the things in the world. And that's not just how I was operating in my everyday life. And so I'm starting to try and incorporate that in my everyday life, in my business and things. I'm like, actually, I don't have to work from 9 to 5. I can work from 9 to noon and then take a break from 12 to 4 and then go work again from 6 to 9. And there's nobody stopping me from doing that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I still fight it because there's a societal like, oh, it's done. We're done with work today because it's 5 o'clock. But I fucked around for 6 hours in the middle of the day. So maybe I want to do some things in the evening, and that's okay. But it's not an easy, it's not an easy thing to fight against that burnout thing. Oh, um, mm. When you have been, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say that business FOMO, that's so real. I feel that's so hardcore, like when you're like especially in that groove and you just want to like grasp every opportunity. Oh, I feel that.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
it's hard too because I think sometimes we get into that feeling of scarcity too. Like there's never going to be another opportunity because we do go through times in our business where things are slower or quieter. And so there is kind of that just like I think innate urge that just kind of makes sense for us as human beings that at one point had to like go get all the food when we were cavemen when we had to prepare for winter. So we are sometimes I think fighting against some like really ingrained behaviors and then with ADHD and our struggles to prioritize and our struggles to think in terms of like now or not now, it is hard to handle taking those steps back when we know we need it. So yeah, the FOMO can be real for sure.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, what are some things that you have done for yourself that were like seem really like small tweaks that you made in your life, but actually had a really huge impact? And if you need clarity on what I mean by that, I can give you an example.
I think I know what you're saying. I think one thing for me is that actually way before I knew I had ADHD, I realized that I had a different brain if I was able to do some type of movement or exercise or be outside in the morning. I actually had, joined a running program on a whim. I was never an athlete in high school, but like I, impulsively read an ad in a community, flyer back in the day when they used to like mail those to your house. And I joined a couch to marathon program. And I learned through that program, I was like, wow, I can focus so much better at work. I feel better. I mentally just feel so much sharper and happier if I run in the morning before work. So as my life changed and I had a bunch of kids and I, had more pressures, it felt really easy to like not want to give myself that time anymore. But I have remained really diligent at protecting the first hour or so each day for me to move in a way that I feel will support me throughout my day. And I'm really grateful that I set that boundary with everyone in my family very early on, and they don't really know much different at this point because it makes a huge difference to be able to support myself in that way.
That's awesome.
For me, I think protein in the morning. That was been a huge game changer for me. With those 6 to 8 hour spreadsheet slogs, would forget to oftentimes feed myself, especially in the morning. Like, so I would get to the point where I would just be like driving, and then I'm like, oh man, I feel exhausted. Around at 3 p.m., it would be like an instant crash. So protein in the morning and snacks, and always making sure that I have a snack with protein in it and some sort of liquid within reach. I am the ADHDer that has 4 or 5 different liquids on their desk at one time, and a hot plate and a cool thing. So like, I need all of the liquids in my life because I need options. But protein on hand has been a huge thing. Like, I don't always have the ability yet to break my hyper focus and not lose it completely. So if I have like a small mini fridge in my office, I go grab the protein, bring the protein back to the desk. It's like seconds. I'm not taking that mental step out to like have to go make myself a sandwich. So cheese sticks, jerky, not the healthiest things, but it's still protein, and some food is better than no food, as the therapists say.
1000%.
Similar to what Meredith was sharing, I feel like introducing a movement practice for me was what really changed things. I also agree, like being in my own energy the first hour of the day and not feeling any shame about needing that time, because I feel like there's like some ideal perfect mother thing that we're all comparing ourselves to, and it just doesn't exist, whatever the influencers are kind of showing, right? I feel like taking that time, pouring into myself and almost kind of like calibrating to my own energy rather than going to social media and things like that, and allowing that energy to kind of put me in whatever direction of what I look at. I feel like it wasn't until my divorce that there was kind of enough pressure to really see like where the cracks were, I guess, so to speak, because I was in the position of really needing to continue to show up in my business and for my clients, because I was living in Orange County and I was like, I had to keep showing up. And that's when I started dancing in my garage and kind of like choosing 3 random songs on a playlist, almost as if that song was my oracle card, and like feeling all the feels. And I am an extremely sensitive person in the world and feel like it can really impact me, or sometimes I can just completely lose it maybe at times if I don't release that pressure valve at times. And so for me, that movement practice was a way of coming back into my physical body, coming back into the present moment, and also having a process of releasing all the kind of feels and energy that we can accumulate as sensitive beings. And I feel like I am like on a journey of like, just even 3 years in, I feel like I'm still just kind of scratching the surface of like what's there and why that works, you know?
Yeah. Uh, a few things. One, sometimes there's like super simple things that I like tweak in my stuff or help my clients tweak to be like, oh, it was that simple. The most recent one for myself was like I used to keep my vitamins on the counter in the kitchen. I mean, I live in a studio, so they're all in the same room, but on the counter in the kitchen. And I just moved them next to me on my desk because when I remember to take them is while I'm working, not and when it's on the kitchen counter, I haven't eaten yet. I haven't done all the things to take the vitamins. And then I have to like break my focus of whatever I'm doing to remember to go. And now I don't have to worry about it. And so I've been taking my vitamins every day since I moved them. And I'm like, wow, that was so simple. So like little tweaks. Sometimes I've watched my clients do this a lot. It's this all or nothing mentality. Like I tried this thing and it worked for 3 weeks and now it doesn't work anymore. So throw it out the window. I'm like, no, 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 wait. If it was working, there's a reason it was working and there's a reason it did stop. So what if we change one thing about it? One of the examples I use is like people who use alarms on their phone. Like, yes, the alarms got boring. So why don't you change the sound of the alarm? And now maybe it'll still work for you. Maybe it won't, but at least you tried. Didn't throw the whole system out the window. um, and the other thing that I've been doing is like recognizing that it takes me a really long time to start implementing a new thing. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so my doctor will give me shit about not stretching when I see that, like see him for my osteomanipulation therapy. And I've been seeing him for like a year. And I would go through spurts where I would stretch and not, but it's only recently that I'm like seeing the benefits of it and wanting to do it. Before I didn't want to do it. And there's nothing in the world that could make me want to do it until I was ready. And now I'm ready to do it. And now it feels really good. And I find that with ADHD, trying to tell ADHDers what to do, even when you're trying to tell yourself what to do, is like the last thing in the world that's going to work. And so being patient with yourself as you're like implementing the new thing, and not trying to implement 70 things at the same time.
I would say that's the biggest thing for, I mean, ADHDs in general, like all myself and all the clients I work with, is grace. Give yourself some grace. Give yourself a break. Like, it's not the same for everybody. Like, it's okay, you learn differently. It's okay, you do things differently. Give yourself some grace. And I struggle with that. And I know every single, especially the women, struggle with that because we're held to such like this high, tight standard of what's expected of us to be mothers or professional women or both, or, there's so many expectations. Give yourself some grace.
Yeah. Okay. Well, tell us about who you are and what you do, since we're, learning to love you and want to know more about you.
I think I'm the only one unmuted, so I'll go ahead and start. I am an ADHD coach, creator, and writer. I post content pretty frequently on Instagram as my main platform. My handle is hummingbird_ADHD. I really like to write, and I find that the posts I do that are in kind of that written form are the ones that my audience responds to the most. And I had always wanted to be a writer, so I found that to be a really creative outlet for me. And then after a couple of years of building that platform, I was given the opportunity to write my first book, which came out less than 2 months ago. I'm really proud of that. It's a long story, but I had a lot of major life events happening as that book was getting written and promoted, and I sometimes can't even believe I pulled it off. So shouting myself out for that.
What's the name of your book?
It's called It All Makes Sense Now, Embrace Your ADHD Brain to Live a Creative and Colorful Life. So yeah, you can find it just about anywhere right now.
That's so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Was it like so surreal to like hold the book for the first time in your hand.
It was amazing. Especially with everything that we've gone through as a family in the last couple of years. There were so many moments where I'm like, I feel selfish for continuing to fight for this project. And when I got my author copies in the mail, they showed up on a day that I didn't know they were coming. So, my daughter really, she's a teenager. She likes to shop. There's usually a package for her on the front porch. And I remember picking it up and being like, wow, this is really heavy. And it has my name on it. And I opened it up and it was this big surprise. So I don't think I'll ever forget that moment.
I am also a published author. It's like, it's so like, what, even I published my book in 2020 and I still pick it up and be like, I did this. This is so weird. And any of you are watching, Meredith's Instagram page is brilliant. I repost her stuff all the time. So check out her things and go read her book. And I'm gonna need to get it myself. I'm excited.
That's amazing. Being a published author, like that has to be a feather in your cap for sure. The commitment that takes, that's awesome. Congratulations, you guys. You guys. I forgot the question, Jess.
Who are you and what do you do?
Oh, my name is Jessie. I own Nerds for Number, bookkeeping, accountancy. I work with neurodivergent individuals, and I kind of specialize in off-beaten sort of professions. So I work with tattoo artists, singer-songwriters. I'm from Portland, Oregon. We have a large population of sex workers. So that's kind of a large part of my clientele. I also have a lot of dog walkers, dog trainers. Love you guys out there. You somehow fit into the largely neurodivergent world. Surprise, surprise, a person who works with animals. Like, and so if you've ever kind of gotten into the sort of part of your career path where you need a little more help and hand-holding and direction when it comes to the financial part of it, that's where I can come in and help you. So go ahead and check me out, nerdsfornumbers.net.
Yeah, and I love Jessie is so good. She's an amazing bookkeeper. So if you want to work with her, get on her wait list because she currently is at capacity.
Yeah. Working on picking up some new contractors and hopefully training another fun new neurodivergent individual. That was a lot. That I'm bringing on pretty soon. So I'm very, very excited about that to introduce you all to her.
Yay.
I'm Ashley Bradley. I'm a coach and I'm a creative. On the creative side of my business, I am a person that does voiceover mostly for apps that do hypnosis and meditation content. So the main app that I worked with for 3 years that we do like 7 to 13 tracks every week is called One Leaf Health. And then I also do like audiobooks for specifically for people that really care about like the beingness and kind of like the delivery and the energetics of things. So I get to work with people who are often neurodivergence, creatives, really heart-centered people. And I love doing that kind of like audio expression work in my life. And then on the coaching side, I would call my ideal group that I create for mostly on TikTok. I do some stuff on Facebook as well. People who are quirky, creatives, usually very heart-centered. Many of them are more like spiritually oriented. And they have some kind of usually very purposeful spiritual connection that they're very afraid to express. And so I end up attracting people that are like, I have this message that I want to share, this art I want to make, or this thing that I want to do, but I'm very afraid to go and be that person in the world. I have a program called Lead with Your Magic, a community and a group where I essentially support people at really being present with what it is that they want to do and finding that confidence and that safety in their bodies to actually be that in the world and learn like the resilience and the courage to be a polarizing individual and know that there's going to always be people that don't want to hear what we have to say or who we are, and like being willing to be that anyway. And that's why I call it lead with your magic, because I think that everyone has like an essence and almost like a medicine to them. And I feel like in the neurodivergent world, it can feel very scary to be one that's kind of like the black sheep or the different one. We all have those childhood wounds. So I love creating things, hypnosis, meditation tracks, workshops, and just communities where people can come back into that like experience with themselves and go make their magic in the world.
Mm. I'm so excited to connect with you more, Ashley, for so many reasons, but one of them is that I'm actually going to be starting to record the audiobook of my book on Sunday, and I would love to get some pointers on that. I'm Jess DuBose. I'm an ADHD coach, and I love helping people get out of their own way so that they can live the life that they say they want to be living. And I do that in lots of ways. I have different programs. One-to-one coaching is like my bread and butter. I love like diving deep into your world and like helping you make the gap smaller. You're here, you say you want to be here, you don't know how to get here, and so let's figure out how to get to collapse the gap in a way that works with your brain and not the way that society says you're supposed to do it. What's also really cool about working with me is I'm a neurotypical ADHD coach, and so a lot of people end up I've heard and witnessed people talk about the healing journey that happens sometimes. So sometimes when you go to a therapist, you find the person who's the opposite of you. Like I'm a woman and sometimes I need a male to help me work through my fucking father wound shit. And so working with somebody who is neurotypical is like, oh, all of a sudden somebody who like sees you and hears you and is not just neurodivergent like yourself, there's something really magical about that. So if you're interested in that, please reach out. And the other thing that I do is I help entrepreneurs. Words are really hard today. So ADHDers who have businesses and helping them build systems. Because there's this weird gap in business where you start to make money and you need help, but you can't really hire someone full time. So you hire someone sort of part time, but then you spend all the time training them, and then it's not really working, and it's this weird thing. I kind of fill in the gaps because I have a background in education, and I love learning how people learn. I also understand neurodivergence to a capacity, and then but I'm also like ridiculously organized, and every job I've ever been at, I've gone in and helped them make the system better before I left. So I'm like, now I get to do that for fun with my clients, and it's lovely, and trying to figure out a way to do it in a way that works with your brain again, instead of the way that society says you're supposed to do it as an entrepreneur. So if you guys are interested in hearing anything from any of us, I will make sure to put their information below. Please reach out to them. Okay, here's a more complicated question, but in what ways has having ADHD impacted your like romantic relationships? Current or past?
Well, I've been married almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years in February, which I feel like I'm not old enough to be able to say those words. But my husband we're like yin and yang. He's pretty opposite of me in terms of all the things I'm impacted and like struggle with as a person with ADHD. He's like got it locked down. He's very organized. He is really a great support system for me in that way. I think something that really has worked in our relationship from early on, I think we recognized how different we were, but how we shared a lot of like common core values. So we are able to appreciate each other's strengths and not try to change each other. We're pretty accepting of that. At times though, it really can be hard to live with someone whose brain operates completely differently than yours. It's hard sometimes to try to explain why things are hard for me when they're absolutely not hard for this other person over here. So it really forces us to have excellent communication skills. We have to always be thinking about that. We have to also really work hard to have routines around checking in with each other, like feeling like, we are understanding where the other person's coming from, what their experience is, because it's not intuitive to either of us what's going on with that person at times. So there's been some really, really challenging things about having ADHD in the context of a relationship, but at the same time, I think it brings like a really great dynamic to how we interact with each other and how we parent our kids as a team.
Thanks.
So I can say for me, it's been a struggle. I'm still really figuring out what it means to me. I think historically, what it has shown me is I will not be a traditional housewife. I tried really hard to fit into that box for a very long time. I come from a very small community that's, very traditional in its relationships. And I'm a queer person myself, so I was already outside of that general structure. But even trying to fit into the domestication piece has always been really difficult for me. It's almost like having a little bit of blinders in those areas. And I realized that it had to do with the fact that like I was never really interested in that. And so my ADHD always like pushed me out of that. Like I'm not interested in that, like any of that. So why would I keep forcing myself to go there? Because it made every little task seem so horribly torturous. And in my relationships now, I would say that it's helped me find a partner that loves doing those sorts of things, but also couldn't make a deadline or show up to save on time to shave their butt. Right? Like, so I am learning to use my strengths in ADHD in my relationship. So I'm very much in that working progress. Still have not figured it out yet, but it's helped me figure out what I don't want. That's what ADHD has helped me in my relationships figure out.
Nice. That's important.
So I would say that I really relate to what you're saying, Jesse, and that I feel like we see a lot of perfectionists, recovering perfectionists in the ADHD community, and I think it has to do with the masking component. So I feel like I chose my husband and went into my marriage from the person that I thought I should be in the world of who was going to be like loved and successful. And my partner, my ex-husband was actually also has ADHD. So I feel like there's a variety of flavors of ADHD, and there's also a variety of like understandings and kind of like who you want to be in the world. I had a really hard time being in a marriage with someone who like didn't want to rock the boat or was like kind of like, I don't, maybe just be like the recruiter, maybe just stay in the business coaching. Why do you have to go and like be the spiritual one or bring that? Why do you have to bring tarot cards to my family reunion? So I feel like I had a kind of a hard time, like at some point being like, well, I want to be who I am in the world and I choose that. And I think it was challenging to feel like it felt like a lot, I think, being a person of ADHD to make that transition. And I see a lot of women and, well, people just in unhappy marriages that are very afraid and feel like they can't survive on their own. And so I do feel like I talk about that a lot because I want people to know that you're not going to have the answers and it's not worth staying in something just to avoid the challenge of figuring that stuff out. It's all figure outable. My partner now I've been with for 2.5 years. We were friends first. And I feel like for me, I didn't realize how much having like a deep soul connection with somebody is really kind of at the root of attraction for me. And that connection and like I just didn't really even feel like there was a lot of things that were maybe available or on the table. But I think as a sensitive person, being friends with someone allowed me to be who I was and to find somebody that there was just an alignment there where we kind of get each other. I feel like now we essentially kind of bonded over all the things that we're super curious about in the world and obsessed with. He's a hypnotist, and we met through our work working with the app company. And so it's funny. He's like writing all of the scripts and I record it. And it's just interesting to kind of be like, wow, like sometimes when you just kind of let go and the universe kind of figures stuff out, there's like really interesting things that happen when we just kind of trust the process. And so, yeah, it's a totally completely different dynamic. And it was worth a really difficult couple years to leave the thing that wasn't working 100%. And he's like, yes, go be weird, go fucking dance on TikTok, like do the weird thing. Like I feel like he pushes me out of my comfort zone more than I do. Or he's like, did you do your dancing today? And it's like, I think we all deserve that person that's encouraging us to be more us and more weird. And yeah.
I love that so much. Some of you who are watching this know this about me already, but I was married to an ADHDer for a while, and while we're no longer married, we're still friends. My book is about it. It's called I Don't Hate My Ex-Husband. One of the things that I really learned about, because when we were married, I knew he had ADHD, but I didn't really fully understand that some of the things that we were coming up against was because of the ADHD. But I had to like start to understand, like, just because you do it differently doesn't make it wrong. It's just different. And coming from a very conservative Christian background and a very black and white mentality that I had at one point in my life, that was really, I'm so eternally grateful to Morris for helping me learn that lesson of like, it's not wrong, it's just different. It's not wrong, it's just different. If you want to empty the dishwasher over the course of 4 hours, it doesn't matter because it's still getting done. I don't understand because I'm just going to do it in the 5 minutes, but it's not wrong. And so if that supports any of you, take that with you. Jesse, I just said my name too, like reading the names. I can thank myself too. Jesse, Meredith, and Ashley, thank you so much for being here with me today. I want to be mindful of everybody's time, so we're going to say goodbye to YouTube. Thank you all for being here. Hit us up if you have any questions or want to connect with us.
You guys rock.
Thank you guys.